Hey everyone, it's Bruce and George here in the Small Pond Studios, and we're broadcasting at you today thinking about the subject of producers. And we want to talk about what a producer can do for you right now, where you can find the right person and how much it's going to cost. So stay tuned to WaterBear, like and subscribe, and we'll keep you in the loop and keep you informed of what's going on. So before we go too much further, George, could you explain what the producer actually does? What is the role?
For me, the producer's role is to have an objective point of view and to help develop the artist, so taking it kind of from demos and turning it into a record.
So whose vision is it? Is it the producer's vision or the artist? Who gets to call the shots here?
I think it's a collaboration of both, but obviously, in my opinion, the artist has the final say because it's their record, it's their art. It's not, you've been hired to do a job.
Right.
As a producer, you've been hired to do a job, and it's their art and their vision on
Right.
it. So that's my opinion.
Do you roll your sleeves up and get stuck into the actual musical content, or is it about what's the sort of issues that you're dealing with?
Permitted. Usually,
Yeah.
the bands that come to me, they've come to me because I've done a certain album
Yeah.
or track that they like, and I do get involved. Usually, because it's within my genre, and I really enjoy getting involved. I get hands-on because I've come into it from a songwriter's point of view.
Right.
So I was a songwriter. I am a songwriter, and I've come into it from that angle.
So you talk about lyrics, top line, melody, arrangements.
Yeah, it's just
parts.
helping develop it if it needs it. Some bands are like already there when they come in, and it's like sometimes it's like I don't really know what to do here.
Right.
I don't think it needs much.
Right.
It might be very little, but sometimes it's just that little thing here and there.
Yeah.
I don't like to make drastic changes. It's just little bits of extra stuff.
Before we go into the studio, how important is pre-production? If that's the case, and you are making those final adjustments to an arrangement or a lyric or something, how does pre-production fit into all this?
Pre-production is massively important. Like the saying is, albums are mixed in pre-production.
Right.
So if you get your arrangements right in pre-production and you get everything figured out, and obviously it helps everyone knows their parts, so you're not changing them on the day.
Yeah.
Because that can put a lot of people off. If you want to make a great record, pre-production is key.
That's really, really good advice. Well, I'm going to chip in here with something as well. I think we need to make a very clear distinction between the producer and the engineer. And I know some people like yourself do both, but the producer's got that, let's get stuck into the musical nitty-gritty. The engineer's job is to make it sound great, and often that's two different people.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a blurry line because an engineer who's good will help you get a great drum sound, guitar sound, vocal sound, all the rest of it, and that's definitely a creative thing. But I think there's a lot of times people are hiring engineers thinking they're getting a producer, and they're going to end up with a great sounding demo, but it might still be fundamentally
I wouldn't
not
say
sound like a record.
It's not the engineer's job to develop it necessarily. It's
No.
the engineer's job to capture it.
No.
To capture it sonically to the best of the equipment they have.
If you're going to have one or the other, the content always trumps the sound of the record, and I'm saying that as someone who loves sound. If the content, the arrangement's great, the song's great, you'll still end up with a much better end result than if it just sounds good but it's still a bit flawed. I think it's very exciting that all the bands that are watching this and all the solo artists that we work with, if they make the right hookup with the right producer, it can make such a massive difference. It happened to my old band. We made the right producer, we made the right demo, it got the record deal and got the whole thing moving. I think if we hadn't made that connection, things might have been very different. Quantifying this a little bit, if you're out there and you've established something already and you've got a band that's happening, what could a producer potentially bring at this stage?
I think everything. Like the producer, obviously one, it's the name of who you're working with, so it kind of ties you in. Like we've often said, but with like who you tie yourself to, and it kind of puts you in a
bracket, plugs you into a scene.
So that can really help.
Yes, it makes a statement, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you're working with someone, it's like, Joey Sturgis is like the metal guy.
Yeah.
So if you go and work with Joey Sturgis, it's
people are going to pay attention at a certain level.
People know what you are because you've gone and done that.
Yeah.
They know that's out and out kind of metal.
Would you think it's fair to say that I think one of the producer's jobs, and one thing they can really do for you, he or she, is to take what's great about the band and pull it to the front and get rid of the stuff that's distracting and help that become sort of directionally, give it a place to go.
And it's their role to bring out the best in your music, so they can kind of come in and go, this is about, or maybe this genre is about this, and that's how we focus on that sonically maybe, and we develop it to make that happen.
And I think there's a degree of editing here.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is what you take out as well as what you put in.
Yes, totally.
And that can be really fundamental to a band being successful, because there's something off-putting about that musically, and it could be, you know, too many busy drums, or it could be a dodgy lyric or something. Just get rid of it and it could be twice as strong.
Yeah, but then that's having that view, to that outsider's point of view, to come in and go, and often because you've been hired to do a job as a producer, people will listen. Is that outside point of view that maybe the rest of the band they've had that, they know it, but they just don't want to do it.
Yes. So where do we find these people? Because they're out there. There's people who have been making great records. You know, we live in an age where we can hire anyone we want. We don't need a record company.
Yeah.
So where do we find the right person?
Listen to records you like. Do a bit of research. You know, it's amazing what you can find out from Instagram.
Yeah.
Just going on Instagram and seeing who's working with who, and often that's what I've done to find out what gear people have got. Like, how have they done that sound? And you stalk through it, and it's the same
just
with
research.
producers. Yeah,
it's just research, you know. And also perhaps being practical. Maybe people that are in the UK are going to be easier to work with, and, you know, cheaper than flying someone in from the States. However, we don't need to rule it out. You know?
No. And it's also it depends on what point you want to bring them in at. Yeah. If it's producing or mixing, you can bring them in at different points. You can even have pre-prod sessions with someone, send them demos for that artist development. You don't necessarily have to go and record with them.
Yes, in terms of managing budget, that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
A lot of people are tracking at home, doing a bit of pre-production before they start to get the arrangement right, and then farming it out to mix.
Yeah.
All right, George, just say we've done our research, we've listened to a lot of albums, we've worked out which producers have done what, we've done a little bit of research to find out how they work and what the band have brought to it as well, and we've maybe got a short list of 3 or 4 people. How do we then approach them?
Obviously, it depends on the levels they're at, because some of them will have management that you have to kind of go through.
Yeah.
Not always the case, but most of the time you're going to have to go through the management unless you've got an in some other way. But most of these people have a website. It is that simple. There is some sort of email on a website or a contact form for whether it's CLA, who does like Blink 182 and all that. There's a contact form. John Feltman, go on his website, there's an email address. Yeah. You can contact him. It's
as simple as that. And the interesting thing is, however big people are, they still kind of have to work. And they still, a lot of the big guys want to work with new bands because it keeps them fresh.
Yeah.
So it's always worth that email. Would you advise against any informal stuff like Facebook messages or, you know?
Yeah, I think obviously it depends on the level of the people you're contacting, but personally I try and, if a band ever contacts me via Facebook, which it does happen quite a lot, as quick as I can try and move it to email, and maybe that's not their fault. If they contact me via my Facebook page, that's different to my personal Facebook. That's there for a reason.
So once you've made that initial contact, the next thing is really budget, see if it is viable, and see if the producer understands your vision and can bring anything to it. And don't be afraid of walking away if it doesn't feel right. And the thing I think the biggest piece of advice I can offer you guys is at this stage, look to work for someone who's got demonstratively more experience than you. If you're working with someone at the same level, you've kind of brought in another band member, really. So it's useful, I think, to be working with people who've sold a lot of records, because they're going to bring that extra layer of experience you need. There's a few variables here, and also let's not discount the fact that some inexperienced people just have magic, and it sometimes works, you know, as well.
Questions to ask a producer when you're approaching them: what's it going to cost per day, per track? People work on different rates. Have a clear understanding of what you're trying to achieve, so you can present that to them, because that's the biggest thing.
And then I suppose the question that leads on from that is, how can you help us achieve that vision?
Yeah.
And how will you do it? Bear in mind, some producers will sell themselves a little bit, but you can find out who's got substance by asking that question. This is what we want to achieve. Specifically, how are we going to do it? How long is it going to take? What's the process? And very much, how much is it going to cost? Including everything. Including studio, mixing, the whole lot, so there's no hidden surprises.
And making sure that you clarify if mastering is included, because that's often the thing people forget about.
Yes.
And that could, you know, it's not a lot, but if you've forgotten about it and there's an extra £300 at the end,
the whole album,
that's like, oh, we forgot about that.
Let's just talk about, we know how much studios cost. You know, that can cost anything from, you know, recording at home to nothing, to 200 quid a day, to anything you want to pay. Realistically, up to 1,000 quid you can get per day. You can get any studio in the UK, more or less. So we know we're going to have studio costs. Now, some producers will have their own studio, which will keep costs down a bit. And by and large, how much would we have to pay per day for a producer? And let's also talk about points and what that means.
Probably talking £200 to £300 a day for mid-level to quite up there. For $350 you can probably get someone really, you know.
And us producers traditionally also tend to include points on the deal. Now that's become less relevant in modern times because it's harder for those points to actually generate any income for producers, because music being free, income streams are in other areas, but still exists. So it's typically anything up to 10 points on the record.
Yeah,
and
so
different 2 to 10 I've seen.
I'm seeing it now more as a percentage per song rather than points, because the records aren't necessarily a record anymore.
Yeah.
So I usually do between 5 and 10% depending on my input on a song.
Yes, and that's on the publishing.
On the publishing.
Yeah, so that's really the royalties that are accrued by the writer of the song, and it's things like radio play, any kind of syncs. You'd get a percentage of those songs.
But I do that. That varies per song for my input. So sometimes it's kind of a flat rate. It is 5. But if I've drastically changed the song, and some producers do co-write with a band, and it does get to that level. So it just depends on.
Yeah, and if it gets to that level, you might have to chip in a bit of your actual songwriting credit.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to have that conversation with people, because people will respect it. Like, producers will respect that you can be upfront, and if you have that conversation at the start rather than the awkward conversation at the end, like, kind of have that up front, and are we open to credits and what can be shared, because some bands might have co-writes with people who aren't in the band, so there's only 50% available, and things like that.
It's just an open conversation. All this stuff's negotiable as well. Another little piece of advice would be perhaps try one song with a producer and see how it goes. Then there's less financial risk. If the thing really works and there's some chemistry, because chemistry is a big part of this, it's like having, like you said, another band member. It can really fly, or it can really tank. I mean, it's doom if it goes wrong.
You don't want to be on a. You don't want to do a record with someone
if you're halfway through an album
and it's just not vibing, then no one's going to enjoy it.
No,
and that's going to come across.
Okay, so this is fine, except we are talking about spending hundreds of pounds at the very least, and that might be fine in a couple of years' time. But how can we hone our own skills as a producer and do useful work producing ourselves?
Well, that's actually how I got into it as an engineer producer. I was in a band. We'd left our label and we couldn't afford to go back into studios for £300 a day. So I started to learn how to do it myself. And there is hundreds of ways you can learn, even as simple as contacting a studio and saying, can I T-boy? That's what I did. I T-boyed at a studio for 3 years and just sat in the background and watched and learned so much that way.
And of course you can just Google stuff and YouTube stuff.
There's
and,
YouTube,
teach yourself.
There's so many content creators out there showing how to do these things, and start off. Don't start off at the basics. Don't panic about this stuff. This is just 16 of the same thing. Don't let that panic you. You can do so much with a small Focusrite interface and guitar simulation. And
there's some great music being made at home.
There's so much you can do.
And even with primitive recording styles, if the song's great and the arrangement's great, you'll still get a good result, and that can have a bit of a charm of its own, particularly in the early stages of a band's career. It gives you somewhere to develop, Here's 4 tips just to summarise that, how we can find the right producer to make a dramatic difference to your band right now. Tip number 1 is do your research, find out who's making the great records and find out where they are.
Tip number 2, work within your budget and have an idea of your budget from the start, so there's no nasty surprises.
Tip number 3, keep your communications entirely professional, use email, make sure everything's documented so you won't fall out about stuff later on.
Tip number 4, write some great songs and have the right raw materials so you're ready to go to the producers.
So this whole area of production is deeply fascinating to a lot of us, and that's why we offer a BA Honours degree that majors in production at WaterBear. Lots of hands-on studio time, lots of one-to-one mentoring. So if you're interested in that, give us a shout and we'll tell you all about the course and how to apply.